Welcome to a Buy Round podcast special. I'm James Graham, and in this 10-part series, I'll discuss the biggest, most talked about topics around our great game.
Rugby League Roundtable.
Joining me, leading journalist Danny Weidler.
So I thought, that's a bit odd that the boss of the game hadn't heard about it.
Current South Sydney Rabbitohs coach Jason Demetriou.
A powerful try.
Former Premiership winning CEO Shane Richardson.
You've got to make some really unpopular decisions.
And Cronulla Sharks captain Dale Finucane.
And the Sharks are off and running.
Today features a look at all things club and game governance.
A Buy Round podcast special.
Rugby League Roundtable.
Now, Richo,
Yep.
This is one for you.
Yep, I'd say quite the last one.
Game and club governance.
Yep.
What are your thoughts on where it's at the moment, as a whole of game?
My thoughts on it is that this would have to be one of the greatest sports in the world because it constantly saves itself from the inadequacies of its governance and its clubs. Constantly. Because the player, well, what I'm saying is whenever we get ourselves in an absolute mess and doing things wrong, we talked about earlier, all of a sudden an origin comes along, which puts us all back on track, or a grand final comes along, and everybody forgets about the inadequacies of the season gone by because of the inadequacies of some of the governance. So it's not a sport that has, in England, you know well, that it's struggled and still can't get forward. In Australia, it's the sport itself that makes a difference. It's not the administrations because it's getting better, but I can guarantee you after 30 years of running clubs in the NRL and never getting sacked, which is a miracle in itself because there's been 85 sacked in my time. At the end of the day, though, it gets down to the clubs that are successful are the ones that have true corporate governance. 20 years ago, it wasn't that way. It was the influencers and people that had on the board, payments under the tables, whatever you want to do. Nowadays, that you've got to be able to run a successful club. And from the NRL's point of view, the challenge that they've got is the same challenge because you've got a board up top, a CEO down below, and what you've got is there true corporate governance in the operation of the game, especially when you consider, in my opinion, the lack of football knowledge that's in the NRL. So how they're making decisions about concussions, with nobody in there that's ever really played the game at the level that's required to understand what football's about. And at club level, even though it's changed from the old blazer wearers, you still find the clubs that are struggling are in a governance situation where they're not accountable. And I think that and what I'm trying to say is it may have improved over the years, and I think it has, no doubt, but is it at the level of the AFL or is it at the level of some of the other quality sports? No, it's not. When it gets to that level, I can't imagine how good we're going to be. I mean,
So what's letting it down?
Well, I think sometimes it's the quality of the people that we're selecting for boards. Boards today...
Are we talking club or game?
Let's talk clubs for a start, because at the moment clubs run the game. Sorry, the clubs are there at the coalface with the game. So what I'm saying there is that the days that where the blazer wearers are sitting on their board without really the butchers, bakers, the candlestick makers, which was great, without any really knowledge of grabbing it forward, but more importantly hanging on to it, they've gone, but they haven't changed completely. And what I'm saying is you'll find in the clubs that are struggling that their administration and the way they're governed and their corporate governance is poor. There's just no other way of doing it. Whereas you find the clubs at the top, the successful clubs, their administration and their corporate governance is at the highest level. And they have people on their board who are actually value-adding to the game, not deteriorating the game, in my opinion.
Do you think it makes a difference if the club is privately owned versus member-owned?
I think, sometimes you'll get a club that's privately owned and you get some bloke that thinks he can pick the team. And it's happened a few times, and that's not Russell, by the way. In the beginning, I think he thought he did, but he certainly doesn't now. My point about it is that you still get crazy people on board. It's about the governance of the board. It's not about whether or not it's privately owned or not. For example, I think one of the greatest examples of changing a board. Now, people will bag out David Smith and what he did. I think David Smith changed the way we view clubs when he was there, because he was all about governance and bringing new people on the boards. Now, there's no way that Parramatta would have played in the grand final 2 years ago if David Smith and the NRL hadn't stepped in and changed that board, put independent directors on, independent chairman, people who are genuinely, instead of that backbiting and fighting and arguing, trying to wear the blazers. That changed the whole view of Parramatta. It changed the way they were. They can become successful again. They could never become successful with salary check cheating, but arguing with each other, stabbing each other apart, leaking to media. It was never going to happen. Now that board's got true governance. It gives the people under it control to be able to do the job, and they're a successful football league. Forget what's happened 1 year out. South is another great example. There was no way South Sydney could do what they're doing without a board that they've got. And I'm not just pissing in their pockets, but when you've got people on a board, from Atlassian, the Packer Group, Russell, these people are smart people who run successful. We should have more and more of them in there. But some of the boards that aren't successful, they've got people in there running them that really haven't got the faintest idea how to run a sports organisation.
Richard, on that subject, right, I think it's really interesting. You talked about the interference of the NRL, or how they tried to help Parramatta. We've seen the Tigers come last couple of years in a row, and we've seen the Dragons struggle because they're these joint venture boards. Do the NRL need to step in to a club like the Tigers and say, look, we're not happy with the way your board's running your team, or we're not happy with the senior management? Do they need to get involved in a situation like that, even though there's not the same situation at Parramatta?
Could they?
Well, they have done. I mean, you've forgotten. You've got to remember, at David Smith's time, there was 4 clubs virtually in receivership. There was Newcastle, there was St George, were very close to it, but they were in a really tough. The Titans was 3, and West Tigers. They were all in a situation where they virtually couldn't pay the bills. And the NRL had to step in and virtually ran those 4 clubs, 3 of those 4 clubs certainly, for a period of time to get them back on track on what should be done, and then handed it back and sold them. Or changed the board, Ashfield coming into West Tigers, sold Newcastle, the West Group bought that. So they'll set up. So it's been done before from that point of view. My point about that is, though, that the reasoning that these boards do struggle is because their knowledge and understanding. You may know how to run a business, you may know that, but that's a different world to running a sports business because there's so much more emotion and so much. You've got to, and what happens with, I've said it before here, these business people, and you've seen it in England, I don't know how many times, they'll buy a club and they've been really successful selling hoses, and then all of a sudden they think they can run a sports team and they take that hose head off and put a pumpkin on. And then they wonder why they've lost millions of dollars because they don't get it. And it's the same out here. You've got people on boards who just don't get what you've got to set up. And the successful clubs, with all due respect to your point before about private ownership, let's have a look at the successful clubs. Like Melbourne Storm, privately owned. South Sydney, privately owned. Penrith, massive leagues club and an independent board separate from what they're doing, but a magnificent junior area to help them along. But most clubs, they evolve and become successful because they change from the ground up and change the way they do business. This world that you can bring in somebody and do this and bring in somebody, it doesn't work and it never will. You've got to change the governance at the top and the board at the top, and then give true authority to those people underneath to run it. And if they don't run it, you know what you do? You get rid of them.
Richard, you did mention one club there who's been very successful, who probably have a dictatorship in a way, the Roosters. Nick Politis runs that club. Yeah, but Nick, I know he's got a strong board.
Yeah, but Nick, well, let's have a look at his board. I mean, it's a magnificent board, which puts a lot of money into that club and a lot of expertise as well. But let's look at Nick when he took over the club. Well, he had 10 or 15 years of no success. When he first got involved in it, he's now learned, like Russell's learned, and Russell, they're smart people. They're not silly people. That's why they're successful. He's learnt, though, that you've got to create a situation where the club's financial, it's runs properly, run like a true business should be run, and that you don't have that day-to-day interference when people trying to do their jobs. Bag Nick all you like, all the things about him, he is a true smart businessman who knew nothing about rugby league until he got involved with. Now, he's a billionaire car salesman. It worries him more about winning on Sunday than it does these billions he's making, because that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. You get involved with the club because of the emotion and all the rest of it. And when you first get involved, you think, I still remember Russell. There's a great story on Russell. So we're playing early on in Russell's day, and Russell in those days thought that, we could do the gladiator speeches and we'd be all good. And he said to me, Richard, I want to talk to the players before the game. And I said, well, mate, I'm not going to come there. I used to come to the dressing room. I'm not going down because I don't think you should be. But if the coach wants to let you do it was JT, and I said, well, that's up to him. I'm not in charge of the dressing room, he is. But I said, yeah, I'll come. I said, no, mate, I'm not. I'll come down after you finish, but I'm not going to go in there while you speak. So anyway, I'm getting on the lift to go down. He's coming out of the lift to go up. And I said to him, how'd you go? He said, tough gig. So you know what I mean? Like, so he learned that night that it doesn't make any difference to doing. But he had to go through a thing of learning that too. But he's smart and he learnt quickly. And Nick Politis is smart and learnt quickly. And their businesses are run like true businesses. That's why they're successful. It's as simple as that. So I think when you talk about administrations and what you're doing, it doesn't matter necessarily whether you've got to have a board that is a board that thinks about, like South's board, for example, would not really discuss 1 minute of football. Truthfully,
it's all about business.
about. They have president. It starts at 8 in the morning and it's finished by 10. 2 hours. Our board meetings start every month. And they set things to go through, accounting with budgets, and then JD, they might invite JD once, well, how many times? 2 or 3 times a year to give you an update on where you're going and everything else. Yeah, and that's it.
Year,
but they don't come out and tell him who the halfback is, or you should be picking Jimmy. Don't think they're the people, because, mate, they've understood that ain't their area of expertise. Their expertise is providing 3 minutes.
That's what makes him a good board, right?
It does.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, very few of that board go along to the mad supporters like the Nick Azissa guys, the Dick Pat, I love. They'll go along every game they can get to. But the rest of them, they come occasionally, and they certainly go to away games because that's not going to make any difference. My point about that is, let the people do the job, get good people involved with your board, let them do the job, get independent people in there, not just people. And if you're going to change the culture of a club, that's the first thing you've got to do. You have to change the board and put people in there who are independent about trying to make it a business. Then choose your executives to do the job and let them do the job. They don't do the job, but you don't get that. You get interference day to day. Blokes on Friday night say, you know, I can't believe that Ilias is still the halfback, and then all of a sudden Monday morning they come in and, you know, quarterbacking on Monday is. I just tell them, I won't use the word because I've used it a few times. My wife keeps telling me, but F off. It's not your job, champ. It's not your job. You don't have to worry about it. You leave it to me. We'll worry about it. My point about it is, until you get into that world, it doesn't mean you ignore them. It doesn't mean they can't give in, but they give the input at a board meeting. And when they make a decision at the board meeting, we're going to sack the coach, because the only person who can sack the coach at South is the board. And if they ain't that decent, then it's my job as CEO to go out and tell them you're sacked. But you can't be there going out and saying to people, oh, you know, because 8 out of 10 times I would have got my way with the board, right? The 2 times I didn't pissed me off because I thought I was always right, you know? I still do. But you don't come out of the board meeting saying, oh, those blokes did it. I wouldn't have done that decision. You come out and say, that's the decision. We're going forward with it. We've made the decision. We're going for it. You've got to accept the captain's decision. But they don't. They get out and they get out. Oh, I voted for you. I didn't vote for there. They ring their press guy up and release something to him. So what I'm trying to say, when you've got that going on, Jack Gibson talked about the front office, but it's really about how smart the front office is, how well governed it is, and otherwise. Now, let's get to the NRL, if you don't me going on. So, the NRL, I mean, let's be honest, Peter V'landys's done a really good job in COVID and all the rest of it, and we're flying off to Las Vegas, which I don't understand, but and all the things are there. The bottom line is, though, the costs were drained out of the NRL, and they cut the costs magnificently, and but he took away people. You know, if we took 4 people away from me and only had you here, the cost would be very minimal. And that's what you do. It's not that. It's what is the expertise you've got in there to run a game that has to go to the next level. And my criticism is they've lost a vast amount of IP that's left that organisation, that day-to-day we have decisions like the refereeing decisions that come up there you have that because you haven't got people going, hang on, mate, that's not how the game works. That's not how you have to do things. You can't just charge it and do that. You need to build it up over a period of time.
Like the 6 again thing was Peter V'landys.
Well, you say it was Peter V'landys. The 6 again thing may have been a good call. I can give you a few other calls that aren't.
I'm not saying if it's good or bad.
What I'm saying is if you make decisions that are based...
It goes to the commission, doesn't it?
It goes
they have
through
a
the
commission.
commission and it's discussed. My point is, though, forget whether V'landys is right, wrong and different. He's done a pretty good job. My point about it is, though, it's a collective decision of your management team to make a change. I'm not sure that's always happening.
Well, who studied the impact of that rule before it was brought in?
I would say they'd spoken to Graham Annesley, who does have an understanding of the game as far as refereeing and changing rules goes. But it happened overnight. There was no the people who really
coaches,
but they'll argue that the coaches all the time. Oh, they'll just do it for their own.
I think what happened
they are
with
the
the
smartest people in the world.
I think what happened with the six again was there was an observation that teams would purposefully giving away penalties on goal line, and then once a penalty was given again, that would advantage the defence because it was again reset the defensive line. So the six again created that doubt of actually I shouldn't be laying on because now the fatigue is even more because we're not getting that rest. We're not getting the opportunity.
But it came out of the wrestle though, mate. They wanted to stop the wrestle. If you're going six again, if you're
it was to stop penalties. It was to stop the direct instruction.
Yeah, speeded it up.
Keep the ball alive, keep it going.
It was to stop
the wrestle. That's why they brought it in.
The flow of the game.
Yeah.
So instead of giving a penalty game, the stop-start nature of the game, they give a six again, and there's fatigue now because you might have made 3 or 4 tackles. So
correct.
The wrestle goes out of the game, the ruck speeds up, and the advantage is real. The attacking team's really getting the advantage because you're not stopping the game, kicking a touch, slowing the game.
There's no
down.
interference from the captain to
Great
say, what was that about? Like,
it was a great change of the rules, but all I'm saying, we're talking about total how to run an organisation, and what I'm saying, it starts with the quality of the board. We've got an independent board with the ARLC. It comes down to the quality of the CEO and that they're able to do their jobs. That's where the question comes in with the.
Because in Danny, they were saying that Peter's big thing was he wanted the game to have more ball in play, so that when people come in to watch 80 minutes, they were getting as many minutes of actual playing time as they could. Whereas a penalty would stop the game for 30, 40 seconds, depending on how long you kick it out. So they were trying to increase the actual minutes of ball in play.
But they've
I'm not
done that
sure
for the last,
how much difference it made.
They've done it for the last 10 years, close ball and play, because that's the comparison. If you look at ball and play for rugby union and ball and play in rugby league, it's a joke. We're double, triple times the amount of time ball and play. So I get that. But the real thing from that was there was long-term discussions about the effect of the wrestle on health and on the game, and people were fed up with it. But it changed the fabric of the game by doing that for the better.
To go back to your point that you made about club governance and not interfering with the stuff on the field, should the NRL not look at going, okay, we need business people to run the NRL as a business, and then have a separate, almost like a rules committee?
Well, let's have a look.
Or a product. Product observing committee.
But we did something revolutionary at South that had never been done. When I came back to South after 15, I was a CEO previously. Russell, when I came back to South, I said, I'll come back, but I'll come back on this basis. We need to change the way we do our business. And we need a basis on what's successful in sport. And if you look at football and you look at NFL, it's the most 2 successful sports in the world. There's no way the guy in charge of football answers to the CEO. He answers directly to the owner. There's no way the CEO answers to him about he answers directly to the owner, because they're 2 specific roles. One is to win football games, and 2 is to run the club successfully. So I went in as a general manager of football, answered to the board, not to Blake. We got Blake in, who's a great CEO, and so he ran the business, I ran the football, and we had success on and off the field. When I left, they changed it around a bit, but that can happen. My point about it is, though, that's what you're saying. If you've got a successful business running over here, that's fine, but this is your business.
Yeah, the
football is your business.
And they might go and say, hey, we're struggling to sell this product. We need to look at making some change. But should they be independent from each other? Should there be a group of people that pure role is to look after the product and look at things like, do we move the grand final? Do we bring in rule changes? Look at the way the game's officiated.
For the next 5 years.
Yeah.
Isn't that the commission?
It is.
Isn't that what they're doing? Isn't that
that's what they'll put in.
I think what James is saying, though, we need to have 2 parts to the commission, like a football part and a business part.
Gotcha.
I think that's what you're
Wayne
saying.
seems to be the
But there should be,
dominant.
because it's 2 different things. And that's the problem with football clubs. They'll bring in a CEO. Most CEOs in clubs now are business CEOs.
Is that not how it should be?
What I'm trying to say is they know nothing about football.
Do they need to? Or do they need to know
if they're going to be over
business?
football and have it dominated underneath them, they need to know something about it, because that's where the culture breaks down.
I know the Bulldogs, Aaron Warburton, CEO, his primary focus is the business side of the operation.
Correct. And Phil runs the football.
And Phil runs the football.
You think Phil's being answerable to Aaron Warden?
It would almost be like two separate roles.
They are, and that's what I'm saying. It should be, and it's the same here. What
I think personally that works.
It is, but it just makes sense, and it's the same as if you look at the successful clubs in England. Let's be honest with St Helens. I mean, you might say that Mike Rush is a guru on he's not a guru in marketing, or he's a guru in football and finding players and he's a people person. My whole point is that it's a different culture about trying to put a football department together. You still have to run it as a business with the costs and we've all got caps and everything, but it's a different world in psychology. People talk about culture in football. The culture in football, if you've got a team mentality and a coach who speaks and gets on with everybody, and there's a thing from up top that's you're able people to get their jobs and people up. That's where the culture comes. You don't just come in and put a thing on the wall and say, right, this is the mission statement. We're now going to have this. This doesn't work. It may work in an environment of a business, but it doesn't work in football. And that's the challenge you've got is to really grow. And our game's growing. And I make the point before, I'm not bagging Peter Fellaini. I'm saying, though, that we could be so much better because the game itself has made us great. Whenever we're in a shit fight, the players get us out of it.
Okay.
They come up with something special. Look,
quickly, you're there with your magic wand. Like, what do you do to make this game better from a governance perspective?
Well, I think you've got to absolutely have a look at each individual club and see what the ball.
Sorry, from a game perspective, though.
Well, from a game perspective, I think that you've got let's go. It's very simple. You've got to be bringing far more people who've got an idea and knowledge of the day-to-day operation of a football culture. It's as simple as that. It's so that they can talk to Des Hasler or talk to Jason Demetriou and talk about, and they can more importantly not talk about the referees, but talk to them and get their opinions. You see, if you get them all in together, they're going to be, they're always competitive. But if you get them individually, they've all got great ideas and thoughts. And if you've got enough people in there, they should be good, like you do. You won't get them all. When you get your team together, some blokes will never talk in that team environment. You'll get them aside, say, Blake, what do you think, mate? What's your thoughts? I can see you're not leading. That's what managing's about. Well, we don't do that. Because what we do is we're making some of these big decisions about Las Vegas and all of, but the real stuff, the game's still dying in the country. We're taking money away from development in Australia. Let's be brutally honest. We're going to put $60 million a year into Pacifica. You talk to the country, you speak to them all the time. AFL is now in the west of Brisbane for a reason, because they know where the growth of the game is. They're not spending money in Papua New Guinea.
They're putting up goalposts there, aren't they?
They are, and the point about it is, what I'm trying to say is, they're smart about their business because they know what their football. They've got the business side.
That's a plan, isn't it? That's a plan to go. We're going to tap into these markets. We're going to invest heavily in Southeast Queensland because
and we're going to do development areas. So, for example, just quickly, I mean, Queensland or the Lions have got $10 million a year extra per year than what every other Melbourne club got. So Collingwood gets $13 million, they've got 23. Gold Coast got $13 million extra. They're still pouring money in this hole out in the Western Sydney. And the reason they can't make the headway there is because rugby league's there in the heart and minds of the people. They've got Penrith, Parramatta, West Tigers, Belmont. You know what I'm saying? What's in the west of Brisbane? None. So why are they there? Because they know that the population growth, that's the smart strategic thing. That's not a strategic thing based around getting extra money in or getting an extra sponsor in. It's based around growth of the numbers of the game.
Richard, you mentioned how there needs to be more rugby league know-how at the NRL. I think that, I think we have to give some credit to Peter V'landys.
I'm not saying I'm giving credit to
him. Because I know he does talk to people. He does consult with leaders in the game and leading football minds before making some of his, not all of his decisions, but at least some of them. And I think that, Jason, do you ever get the chance to speak to him? I don't know whether...
To Peter?
Yeah.
No, not really, no.
Yeah. Well,
he does speak to several coaches. I know that Trent will have a relationship with him. I know Wayne speaks to him quite often.
Yeah.
So.
And could you pick up the phone and say, listen, you're just not doing it right? Or
I suppose I could, yeah. I haven't done, but I'm sure.
I think that's important. That he should tap into the knowledge of all, good football minds.
How great a player was Greg Inglis?
Yep, great.
When he ran on the field, could he have won the game by himself? It wasn't like Arthur Beach at an island. It could he have won the game by himself? He can't.
No.
He can play well. They kick it to him from a kick-off. He'll run straight to him, knock him over. He cannot win the game. And my point about it is this, is that it's all right Peter, who I think's got great ideas and that sort of. But the reality is, it gets back to what I talk about governance. How good is your team underneath you for the long-term betterment of the game? That's my point. Is that
is
no
there
one's
a team
questioning
underneath him? Is there like a genuine team underneath him?
Well, you tell me who's involved.
That's what I'm saying. I don't.
Well, you do know.
The
You're
commission.
right for the Sydney Morning Herald, so you know.
You've got the commission. You've got,
That's not underneath him. That's on top of him.
on top, underneath him, there's not a lot.
Well, that's my point. I'm not saying anything else. I'm not talking about whether Petey's got great ideas and all that. I'm just saying if you're going to build a team for the future, you can't just rely on one great player. If you're going to build a game for the future, you can't rely on just one great man.
What's this saying about Andrew Abdo then?
Well, I don't want to criticise you. Andrew and I worked together for 12 months. He was a very close friend of mine. But Andrew would be the first to say, what knowledge have Andrew got about football, rugby league? Be honest, he'd be here now. He's got none. He's never played the game.
But he's a sharp business operator.
Yeah, he is.
Which is kind of what
which is what you need.
Yeah,
spot on. I'm talking about football though. Who in the outside of Graham?
So you're saying we need some sort of strong footballing person in there?
Or more than one. I think I think you've got to see if you're going to do development pathways and everything else, you've got to have a very strong operation in there that's deciding it. Now, Peter's trying to centralise things. That's why he's having the fights with the states and everything else. But if you bring it all in, who's going to actually do it in the field? They are actually in the field now, in these clubs, in these organisations, in schools, doing things. My point about it, what is the plan? Not just a political plan.
Isn't that the idea, centralising it though, so that you're still going to have people in those areas, but they're working to one footprint. That would be my understanding. If he's trying to centralise it like that, you still like to your point, you're still gonna need technical and tactical and experienced people in those areas to grow the game.
Yeah, but my point about it is this, mate. If you're running a business, how many Westpac banks are in the country? They've cut them off by about 80% of banks in the country. It's all based centrally, okay? But what they're able to do is do outliers to them to set it up. My point of it is, it's all right having a central operation, but you've still got to have people on the ground and the legs in the area to do it. Now, if you've got a central operation and you're operating with Queensland and what's her name, doing a pathways thing, centrally operate, I get that. But what I'm saying, you still need the expertise on the ground to be able to do that. And whether we like them or don't like them, the Queensland and New South Wales Rugby League have been doing it forever and ever and ever. Could they be more efficient? Probably.
But is the game growing?
No, it's not.
So are they doing a good job?
Well,
is that not the point?
You don't think it is
but
growing?
it's not going to grow either by if you give $60 million to Papua New Guinea.
No,
and
I
nothing to
couldn't
country.
agree more,
So what I'm trying to say to you is, if you're sitting there and mapping out a plan, if your plan is, and I'm not again, my plan wouldn't be that way. My plan would be to disperse the authority rather than to bring it in centrally, because I think that people on the ground have got more knowledge. But if you wanted to make it a central location, it's fine, you do that. But still, you've got to announce that plan. It's got to be enunciated to everybody in the game. That's what we're going to do. You've got to fund it. You've got to budget it. You've got to go forward. Do you know any of those things that are going on?
No.
And that's the problem you've got. You can do that, but you've got to make sure what the plan is there. The plan at the moment is forever and ever, New South Wales and Queensland Rugby being a pain in the arse to the central operation because they love doing their own thing with it. Well, let's be honest. I'm just being really basic about it. But they do a good job. But if you want to control it all, you've got to control New South Wales and Queensland Rugby League. And that's what's happening at the moment. My point is, if you've got the plan there to why you're doing that and changing it around, tell us all. Tell us what's going on. Tell us what the plan is. Map it out over 5 years, and we'll get on to expansion. There's another reason for that too, because that should be part of the plan.
The transparency is important. We speak there about some of the decisions that get made in the boardroom to affect and change the product, but the people that affects the most is the players. Dale, what is it like as a current player when perhaps there isn't that level of consultation? I'd certainly felt that when the 6 again rule came in and there was a number of changes, there wasn't that consultation with the players. Did you feel affected or anything along those lines?
I felt like it was frustrating that given that we're the ones playing the sport, obviously the players and the coaches weren't consulted throughout that process. I don't know. I feel like there should be like almost a committee of players, coaches, and those guys who are making the decisions, and that should be the consultation process. Because at the end of the day, we're coming out there, and to your point, JD, as well, it's often been on very short notice as well. I think during this pre-season just gone, the rule where both feet behind the referee came in, and that came in extremely late. And as long as I played the game, it's always been 1 foot. As long as 1 foot makes a referee, that's fine. And it doesn't sound like that big of a rule change, But when, you're fatigued and throughout your whole career you've just gone 1 foot and then line speed, that makes such a big difference, in the way that you play the game, and you have to, police how that line is coming up. So, yeah, for me, I would be wanting to have a consultation process where you've got a coach, some players in there, some senior players.
Or the Players Association have a representative on there, or be part of the decision-making committee, or be part of the process and be involved in that and what's best for the people that they're trying to look after their players.
Yeah, and I just think, with any rule change, I think the consideration is what outcome do we want to achieve? Is it more fatigue in the game? Like, is it keeping the ball live? Like, what outcome do we want to achieve by implementing a rule change? So I just feel like the people who are on the field, the people who are coaching the players, need to be the ones who are at the forefront of making those decisions.
I agree with everything you're saying, but to play devil's advocate, in both cases of players and coaches, self-interest rules, doesn't it? Like, people are going to do what's best for them in terms of a club. Like, it mightn't work to your strength or your team's strength to make a certain rule change, so you're going to arc up, aren't you? You're going to say, no, I don't want that. You're not thinking, I don't know I'm not being rude, but I don't know if the players and the coaches necessarily would think of the broader impact on the game. They might think of the impact on their club.
I agree, yeah. I couldn't agree more.
And some clubs more than others.
I think there needs to be some consultation to have a voice, but not control or input in the decision. So, yeah, we need to have some input. We need to get our key stakeholders to have some input. So we help the NRL make the decisions, but the NRL or the head of that football program, they need to own the decisions. They need to make the decisions, and they need to pass that information on at the right time.
Yeah.
Well, because it does have a massive implication. So, say, for example, the interchange rule. Yeah. If that drops, like, your roster management plan totally changes. Your value as a player totally either massively increases or all of a sudden it's going, ooh.
Well, yeah, you look at the interchange or you look at the six again and you look at those guys who are 125, 130 kilos. Are they as effective as what they would have been prior to those rules coming in? And if those rules are only implemented, say, at the start of preseason, and I'll use someone like Nelson or Tom Burge, someone who's, probably 125, 130 kilos, does that take their effectiveness away because a last-minute rule change has come in?
Absolutely,
Or does the importance of a dummy half then become more paramount than it is because the new running or a style of dummy half? If I'm a runner, I'm going to get more quick play the balls. Based off certain
basic
rules.
principle though, of governance and management is this: is that what you're talking about? Is that you have input without final decision-making process. So the input should come in, and all we have vested interests, and hopefully they're smart enough, because I'm not sure they are. Smart enough to be able to say, well, okay, we get that, but this is where we want to go. But you've actually got the input from the players and wants them to do it. I don't see that happening now.
If you think about it as assistant coaches, as a head coach, so a role as assistant coach is to give you information, give your input and your advice, and the head coach will make the final decision. And then you'll walk out of the room and go, that's the direction we're going. Similar to what you spoke about before. But I think, the danger in getting everybody to have a voice is that everyone's too scared to make a decision because every club is going to have slightly different voices.
Yeah, and different agendas and different ambition.
And that's where you've got to differentiate between, okay, this is a bit of club interest, but these are important. If there's a consensus across the game, then okay, that's important. But then you need strong people to make the decision and own it.
Well, that's only where Volandis is good. Because he is. I mean, like him or whatever, he's a bull at a gate. He calls himself a can-do administrator. He makes stuff happen.
He gets shit done.
I like that.
He gets shit done. He says, "This
I
is
don't always agree with it, but I like that he gets stuff done."
His decision-making process is almost like, "This is where we're going, boys, girls. This is where we're going. Get behind it."
Right?
Yeah,
but
and that's okay. Nobody is.
No.
The great coaches don't run around asking everyone, all their players, his opinion.
Yeah, well,
the great coaches understand what the team needs, gets input from the players that have been there, done that, and have some positive way of it, and then he owns a decision and drives it.
Yeah, and you have a vision and you have consultation.
Yeah, 100%.
But if you get a committee trying to design a horse, you end up looking like a cow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because everybody has a slightly different. Not everyone's
ideal.
going to agree.
Everyone's got a different vision of how they how the game should be.
You can be inclusive though and still be a strong leader.
Definitely.
You don't
Definitely.
have to. You don't
It's
have to just be a
it's fine
can-do
line,
person,
yeah.
and
But
without having people underneath you who are actually advising you where the game should be going over 5 to 10 years.
Again, that's where you get the key people underneath you.
That's correct.
To give you the advice that you think you need to make the decisions that you're going to make.
Yeah, mate, Churchill was a magnificent prime minister for the war, won the war, and they voted him straight out afterwards because he didn't have the plan to go forward that the people needed. So that's what we just got to make sure. What is the plan? And we'll all buy into it once we know the plan.
Well, we'll look after we finish on this about where we will look to go as a game. Some of the issues that aren't apparent now, but we may face in the next 5 or 10 years. But I just want to quickly ask you, Richard, looking at sports governance and what's going on in other sports, is private equity a good option for rugby league?
Well, private equity is an option throughout the world, so there's no reason it won't be here. It's only hadn't come here because we've had leagues clubs.
No, but I mean for, say, well, for a club itself, but I guess that's kind of like private ownership. But for the game, could the game sell?
Oh, no doubt. There's no
part of the game. Could 51% ownership go to a private equity in Saudi or wherever or anywhere in the world, or even within Australia?
Yeah, but the point about that is though, this is a game that's owned by the people, so it's still in that category there. Private equity is something rugby union looking at for one reason and one reason only: they're broke.
Yeah.
So we're not broke, and we've got a great product.
But just because we're not broke doesn't mean that we're
I know what
anywhere near our full potential.
Yeah, I know, but that's my point though. What is if your plan is over 5 to 10 years to build up a real estate to own all the fish restaurants in Brisbane and all the fish restaurants at Cronulla or whatever it is they're buying into, that's fine. But what is the plan though? Why are we accumulating the assets and what are we going to do with it? The business plan for that, it may be in 5 to 10 years' time that we're looking at private equity buyers in what the game's worth, et cetera, et cetera. I don't believe they should be doing that now because I think it'd be like, buying private equities into Google when you start it up. At the end of the day, you know it's going to be successful and you're going to go on with it. My point about it is, though, is that I think the problem we have is what is the enunciated 5 to 10 year plan of where the game's going? What are the number of teams in the competition? What does the television look like? What does equity in clubs look like? What is the value of it? What's going on? What are we doing with pathways? There is no vision of that. Now, if you're going to sell any business, the first thing you need to sell is the vision of where you're going. So if you're selling the business at the moment, all you're going on as EBITDA and what we're doing as far as our cash situation goes. But if you're going to sell a business that had a business plan for 5 to 10 years and we're going to the States and we're doing this or otherwise, that's a vision that billionaires will get involved with. So that's my whole point. I think we're underselling the game by doing one-offs and doing little things along the way.
What do you reckon the billionaires would think of buying Gamberos?
Yeah, well, I don't know why they bought Gamberos.
And
I'm no real estate guru, but I understand the point behind it because, let's be honest, Nick's been arguing this for years and years and he's right. And he's done a great job for the Roosters. Because you need to have physical assets behind you.
Well, they own leagues, clubs, they own bowling clubs.
Yeah, they do. And more real estate.
Real estate,
You don't even know how much. You've got more real estate than the Catholic Church, Nick.
Assets.
And so at the end of the day, it's a smart business move. And but if that is the plan, well, tell us about it, and then we understand it. Not just overnight you pick up the paper, we bought Gambaros. Nice seafood restaurant. It's not even that nice a seafood restaurant. But at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is you'll buy into that. In your pathways, we're going to invest here. We're going to invest in Pacific because of this.
You want an explanation?
I want a mapped out plan. There's no way I can go to South's board and tell them that I'm going to do this like that and I'm going to make a captain's pick at the table because I want to change. It doesn't work that way. You've got to have a 3-year plan to 5-year plan. You work to it. You might change it every 12 months to manipulate. But no business doesn't work that way. No business. Do you know what the television deal is?
I don't know for how many years it is.
I
don't know the figures.
I know what Channel 9's part of it is, but I don't know what Fox is. But the game doesn't know. What is the budget? What is the plan for 5 years? What is the plan for 10 years? What are we going to invest in pathways? How are we going to grow the game? What are the percentages to grow the game at? My point about that is that it's, we've got to make sure we have got a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful product. We've got to make sure we run it properly and organise it properly going forward because it's for all of our kids and all of our grandkids. And but my point about it is it's remained a great game for one reason and one reason only, because of him.
Talent.
It is the talent. Every time we get
the actual game, the product.
The game was going to die, wasn't it? When Super League came in, the game was going to die. And I said at the time, it won't die because Jimmy Smith and his father are still going to do the barbecue at Dubbo. That's never going to change. They're never going to give up, and that's what rugby league survived on. These people who are the fabric behind it have kept it going, and then the players that we produce, because we have got really good systems with SG ball mats and everything else. They come out and come up with the greatest start. All of a sudden, Fatty Vaughton wins 3-0 in a state of origin with nobody in the team. These miracles that happen because of players. They didn't happen because of Fatty Vaughton. Not like Fatty's a great guy. My point about it is, though, the game saves itself constantly because it's a great product.
It is a great product.
Great product.
It really is.
Look
And
at Rugby Union.
I don't think
at
we're
Millwall.
quite maximising its full potential, and perhaps that's one of the reasons why we are venturing into Las Vegas. But I'll just quickly ask, is there any sort of issues that aren't even on the radar that will be coming up in the next 5 to 10 years? I'll just go across the table.
I thought about this through the weekend. Probably the thing we spoke about last time was the introduction of the AI, whether that gets introduced and whether you make the referees obsolete and everything's perfect to an exact, like everything's exact. Personally, I wouldn't like to see that, but that's probably where I see the next introduction and our evolution of our game happening.
Yeah, well, we've seen it in the Premier League with the introduction of VAR. I think it's been in the competition now there for 3 seasons, and it's made the focus is all on the decisions it gets wrong and the nitpicking and the lack of emotion, and I'm probably
who's doing it?
VAR is
AI, is it?
It's video technology. The sort of every decision has to be correct to the letter of the law.
Yeah,
and it's caused a lot of controversy. It's got teething problems which you would have thought would have been ironed out pre bringing it into talk about $1 billion industry that is rugby league, like with the soccer, like we're talking trillions. So it's affecting a lot of things. But
I guess the other point of the evolution of those rule changes we spoke about, like how does our game look in 10 years? You look at the 80s where a classic legs tackle was outstanding. Like you look at it and the commentators go, "Oh, how good was that legs tackle?" Whereas, now they're not rewarded. You get a quick play of the ball, a man will be left on the deck, and they'll have to retreat back. So I just wonder how our game looks with the evolution of the rule changes. That we still having 2 men up top tackle, third man in at the legs, 1 man back retreating. Like I wonder what our product does look like with the evolution of the rule changes over that period.
That's where I think we just got to be smart with it, what changes we do make. I mean, there's been some fantastic changes the last 5 or 10 years to the game. You think about the taking out the corner post.
Yeah.
As like what
we forget what that
has
about.
created in terms of absolute product to look at and the athleticism of wingers now.
Spectacular.
The try, an English winger who scored for Newcastle late this season, Dom Young. I mean, wow. Like, that is just unbelievable. That's not a try 5 years ago, 10 years ago when the rule was in there. So we get caught up on the 6 agains a little bit, but there's been some fantastic rule changes that have made a massive difference to the viewing product. As long as we keep making sure that the product is at the forefront of what the decision's been made, we'll be fine, because it is a great product.
Any issues you foresee, Danny?
I don't know if it's so much an issue, but I think the game, if it gets it right, is going to become worth more and more to the networks, like from a media perspective. Because, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I find it hard to watch a lot of the other shows on television. But I watch sport. And I watch...
Because it's the best.
Well, it's unpredictable. It's a drama.
It's the best reality TV. Yeah, they invented reality TV, but we already had it.
And that's why I think if we can get it right now and Richo can have a plan, or someone like Richo can have a plan for the game, and I just think it grows in its worth because it's so good to watch. And I think that's a positive. We've talked a lot of negative and doomsday sort of stuff, but I think it's a positive that free-to-air TV, if that's where I live, it needs the sport.
100%.
And
well, look at cricket.
I think the strength. Yeah, exactly.
I can't even tell you what's going on in cricket.
No, because it's
gone from free-to-air TV.
Like I've been watching the World Cup, but I mean, like a lot of the one-day stuff. Like I grew up on one-day cricket, and that's for the general tournaments. You don't watch them.
No.
If it's a big event, I watch it. But I think that the rugby league's got to know that it's the free-to-air and all the networks probably need it. So get it right now, and I think it's a positive.
The game will never go backwards. It'll only go forward. It's a matter of how quickly it goes forward, and we can take it very quickly. And I've said before on the show, I think in the next 10 years' time that international football is going to become a major role. The game is still about the NRL at the moment, but international football is the greatest adventure we can take this game on. And coupled with that, nines football, etc. There's a whole range of things we can do with our product that can change our vision and take it to areas at nine football in Asia or otherwhere that people can't play because of the size or otherwise, but nine football again. I just think there's so many opportunities. I'm the luckiest man in the world to be involved with the game the way it is, but I think there's enormous growth opportunities. It's how quickly we do it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, when we say it's the greatest game of all, well, why are we keeping it such a secret?
Yep.
Why are we just having it in a couple of states in Australia, New Zealand, and a corridor in the M62 of England? Like, if it's so great, why are we standing still?
Correct.
We still got to grow.
Yeah.
And we use Super League as a great example. They went with this model that we're going to grow the game. That's what we need to do to generate more interest, to grow the game, the product. But they did it at the expense of its growth, of its areas, its heartlands.
Correct.
The heartlands have spread their wings, but at the same time, I would love to see the game grow and spread its wings. But we've got to invest in our heartland, and our heartland at the moment that needs investment is country rugby league. We have to have a footprint in there, and that has to be at the forefront of whatever the plan is, because we have great players coming through at the moment, but numbers are dwindling, and if we don't do something to increase it, then are we going to keep getting the talent coming through?
Well, again, that's where I think, just to loop the conversation back in before we finish it off, that club governance. Like, you look at the smart football clubs now, and they're starting to get the Bulldogs, for example, that they head to other areas, untraditional areas, because they realise that there's an untapped potential. There's a talent pool there that if we invest in some pathway structures, it will pay dividends.
Worked at Penrith, hasn't it? Yeah.
It's what we've been doing at South Building for 3-4 years now.
Like, if you look
just
at
done
Penrith,
a deal with Townsville Blackhawks. We've got an EPD system that runs out of southeast Queensland. Our first priority is to pick our local kids, find the best kids in that area and bring them through. But when the area doesn't produce big players, so there's little areas, things that we know as in terms of different positions. Okay, have we got them in that? Is the best kid coming through?
And it's a numbers game. You've only got 3,000 juniors.
Exactly.
They got nine. Penrith got 9.5. They've got 3 times the opportunity to be able to find a player, haven't they? It's a simple numbers game.
But again, it's a plan through the governance, through the board, through the CEO, of how we grow, give ourselves the best chance.
A lot of people look at that Penrith model and go, "Oh, look at the junior nursery that they got." Well, James Fisher-Harris wasn't born in Penrith. No. Isaiah Yeo wasn't born in Penrith. Leota wasn't born in Penrith. Nathan Cleary came through a system in New Zealand when his dad was there. So, like, the smart clubs are getting wising up to that, I feel, and starting to spread their wings and set their bases out. And maybe that is, the NRL are going, well, we're going to take a step back. We're going to let the clubs look after that. Because if they're smart, they'll gain a competitive advantage.
You a high school in the Gold Coast.
Yeah, but mate, the clubs look up for a very finite area.
Keeper.
They're not going to go out to Dubbo and bloody.
Well, Penrith did. They got Isaiah Yeo from there.
Hang on, there's two forms of this. Is what we've got to get to understand. It's all right picking out the big tuna fish and saying I bought him in from Bathurst and he's playing for my team. The game only grows by the participation growing. It gets back to the percentages. You're 3 times a bigger chance at 9,000 people as you are for 3. Our challenge is if we don't grow that base and grow, and it's going backwards, let's be brutally honest, it is. The only reason our figures are up is because of women's sports up there. That's popping our figures up.
Touch footy?
But that's not my point about it. Is you've got to make sure you put money into the growth in those areas, because they're the areas. The greatest area in Australian football from Queensland is Toowoomba. All the great players have come through that area in Toowoomba. It's called the Lockyer Highway, going up there and everything else. Now, they're on the bottom of the ladder in the Q Cup. Unless the Bulldogs were given the money in the Q Cup, they couldn't even have a team in the competition. Yeah. And they've got over 7,500 juniors in that area with no one supporting them. So we've got there's 2 forms to it. One, the clubs do a great job of talent scouting, and that's it. But the real area is the 97% of players that just participate.
Yeah.
Unless you grow that area, you're not going to get to 3%. It's a numbers game.
All right, quickly, just to wrap it up, we'll go through maybe something from a club governance that you'd like to bring in, if you could. Oh, sorry, not club governance, game governance. Something about maybe referees. What would you bring in, Richard, just to finish us off?
I love referees, so that's not a problem for me. No, I just think there's two parts to the game, and at the club level and the NRL, there's football and then there's the commercial part, and they don't always meet. And the bottom line is that football is what we're here for. That's the product. You might have, Suncorp and fucking all that. At the end of the day, you haven't got a football team, you can't win. And so why we need to have the huge amount of resources, more resources put into football people who understand the culture of how to grow the game.
I'd bring an old social media guru in to help the NRL, Richo.
My son, not me. He's a social media guru.
I'd add to the commission someone that's specialising in growth, get some great minds that understand participation and have some key figures that we're going to measure on that show that the game's growing.
I agree.
I think just back to our point, are you talking about in terms of the committee, the players and the coaches and the consultation process? Like that's, for me, in regards to rule changes and I guess the timing around that as well, because previously, as I said, they've been last minute, they've been a Thursday email, or they've been just before the season starts. So that process, I reckon, could be a lot better, and coming along the ride needs to be the players and the coaches.
Yeah, well, I think we can all be excited about where this game is going. I think it's in pretty good hands.
It's called the greatest game of all.
It is. We just need to start to tell the world, and that will begin February or March rather with the little trip to Las Vegas. So hopefully, we'll save that. We'll save that. Thanks everybody for contributing. That was a fascinating conversation.
Well, that was a great episode of the Rugby League Roundtable, talking all things game and club governance. Now it's time for the Tui's mailbag. As you know, we don't have room or space for a fan at the Rugby League Roundtable, but that doesn't mean that we don't want to hear from you. We love hearing from you, especially when you disagree with what everybody says and when you disagree with what I have to say. So this is in response to the player movement episode, all thanks to Tui's. How do you feel? I feel like a Tui's or two, and I also feel like hearing from you. So we've got a couple to get through today, some great responses, and apologies for all those that we couldn't get through, but we really do appreciate everybody that made the time and effort to give us their opinions and questions and talking all the issues in our great game of rugby league. First off, we've got Daniel Vemer 3363 on YouTube. James's concept of the transfer window will end up having teams be like the Dolphins, with limited time to set up a team for the following season. A year out, I think it's a good amount of time for clubs to prepare. Well, Daniel, I don't think using the extreme example of the Dolphins is a legitimate or good enough reason not to do something, because all the clubs would be in the same boat. So every team would be subject to the same set of rules and circumstances. So I think it is enough time to move things around. I think it adds to the excitement, and I believe for the greater overall good of the game, the trade window at the end of the season and maybe midway through the season works very well indeed. And I guess on the outlier, the introduction of franchise teams or new teams, new franchise teams, then there's plenty of other sports that do it. So we could look at different models. The expansion draft is something that really would excite me, and to see the reaction from certain players, it'd be interesting to know how I'd feel about being protected or not protected. But look, I think this is a system that can work. I think eventually we will get there. It hasn't happened yet, but I don't think that's a good enough reason not to do something. Okay, next question we've got, again from YouTube. Wash Up TV or Wars Up TV. Until you can trade players for other players in a trade window, we're not a legit franchise sport. In today's sporting climate, we want mid-season trades and transfers. Well, yes, I agree. I think that is what most people want. I agree with you to a certain extent about not being a legitimate franchise sport. Obviously, we look at how our sporting culture is formed and what it's based off. It's a bit of a hybrid between the American sporting system and the European sporting system. But yeah, look, I want these trade windows coming in. I agree. On TikTok, on the minimum wage issue, we had Blackwaman. As a fan, I'd like to know if one of our players was moving on so we could farewell them at the game rather than have them disappear in the off-season. Look, yes, I fundamentally agree. Obviously, with a trade window, that is difficult. But I guess if you knew the player was going into the trade, i.e. not re-signing a new deal and was going to be a free agent, you would get the opportunity to bid them farewell. Some would obviously re-sign and stay at their parent club or their current club. But look, that is something that always, there's some regrets there, about not getting my opportunity to bid farewell to the Bulldogs fans in my last game. And it would be a better system. I think there's always that appreciation between the players and the fans, and especially when someone's moving on, you do want to show your appreciation for one another. As a player, you want to be able to show your appreciation for the fans, and when it's that one last final time, it makes that all the more important. So a very good point. Whether or not that could coincide with the trade window at the end of the season, I'm not so sure. Another one from TikTok, we've got Waz and the NRL. Well, I think about the minimum wage sort of question, or the issue that got brought up. And the NRL need to let players get their own sponsors and create their own businesses. Well, I think that they do. So I think you are allowed to have your own individual boot sponsor. You're allowed your own third parties as long as they're not affiliated with your current club. And many players start up their own business. So wise, you are right, because they do. Final question. So thanks again for everybody who's sending in. We got this one from Instagram, James Manoli, about the minimum wage. Wrong path. If there is no financial incentive, young kids will always go to the best clubs for development. Struggling clubs won't get any traction. Well, James, great point. That's something that I probably missed. I was in agreement with JD's point on having a minimum wage for young players. I think there is a negative aspect to that, but you are right then. All the top talent would migrate towards the top clubs. And that's an interesting side of the debate that I probably didn't consider. So thanks for that, James. It's probably made me reconsider a little bit that issue. And maybe you're right. Maybe that is better left alone, so to speak. But I do get the positive aspect of bringing in a minimum wage for those younger players. But I guess that would be a restriction on trade as well, and potentially ageist, which I certainly am not. All right, well, that just about wraps us up for the Tui's mailbag. All thanks to Tui's. How do you feel? Feel like a Tui's or two. And I also feel like hearing from you guys. So thank you again for all your comments. We can't get through them all, but please comment, question on the next episode of the Rugby League Roundtable. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.